Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So, grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back for another conversation with a children's literature author. Now, if you're listening to me in real time, you might be a little confused because this is not our regularly scheduled Friday episode. But since it is summer, I have added multiple bonus episodes throughout June and July to help us boost our summer reading life all season long. So today I'm talking with Caroline Palmer. They're the author of Camp Prodigy, a middle grade graphic novel that follows two non-binary kids who navigate anxiety and identity while also having fun and forming friendships, of course, at their summer orchestra camp. It was just published on June 11th, just in time for the summer reading season and perfect to add to your TBR stack. Caroline, welcome to the KidLit Love podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, of course, the pleasure is all mine. I did not always appreciate comics as a kid, but as an adult, I have really, really grown to love graphic novels, especially when there is one so heartwarming and relatable and timely for the summer season as yours. And it's your debut book, right?
Yeah.
Which is even more exciting. So why don't we dive in with introductions and tell us a little bit about you and your backstory. I know it is your debut novel, but it is not your first foray into the graphic world. So tell us all about yourself and how you came to be here today.
Yeah. Well, my name's Caroline, and I've been drawing comics for probably since elementary school, fourth or fifth grade. So I've definitely been doing it a long time. And it was always like my sort of dream job, I guess, to become a comic creator. So, hey,
You did it.
Made it there. But yeah, so I was lucky enough to be able to get like a book deal, go to a college where they had like a major in comics and things like that, and now I'm here.
Wow, I didn't realize that I knew there was graphic design and graphic illustration, but to be able to really lean into that love that you had as a kid and then see how it could just be brought to life as a job, that really must feel like a dream come true that you get to do this all day.
Definitely, definitely. As a kid,
I
it was like kindergarten or so. I was like, oh, I want to be an artist when I grow up, and nothing more defined than that. And then in fifth grade, I ended up finding, getting into comics, and then it was like, oh, okay, we zeroed in on the specific thing.
Right, you figured it out. What were some of your favorite comics as a kid?
I read a lot of manga, like Japanese comics.
Yes,
Which,
my son is
yes.
addicted to manga. We could have a whole conversation about that because I read them with him.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that was like, because there's also like, sort of more US mainstream comics like superhero things, Marvel,
Right.
DC. I was never so into those. I guess I just didn't find the style as appealing. As a kid, you want something kind of cartoonish.
Yes.
And I hadn't been into manga for a while because I thought it was all just guys with pointy chins. But I actually, at another summer camp, a friend showed me like one that she really liked. And then I was like, wait, this isn't all just guys with the pointy chins. It's like, this is cool. So I just got really into it. And then ever since then, it's expanded a little bit. Like, and I don't just read manga anymore. But that was like my first sort of spark of like, oh, okay, comics are cool.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm,
and I must admit, when my son first turned me onto that genre, I
mhm,
thought, "Oh, what what is this going to be about?" And
mhm.
I got hooked
Yeah.
quickly with him because,
Mhm,
what people might not expect at first because they may make judgments about what it looks like and then it looks
mhm.
cartoonish, but
Yeah.
there is so much more depth than I ever
Mhm.
could have imagined in
Yeah.
manga, which really just made me appreciate the entire genre, including graphic novels as well.
Mhm.
He's kind of proud to say that he converted me a little bit
Yeah.
to that.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
definitely.
so you love manga, you end up in college to kind of lean
Mhm,
into this kind of illustration.
mhm.
What happened between then and this book number 1?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I did, pretty much study comics in college. Um, I feel like I, jumped in skill level quite a bit because it was just, you could focus, like, exclusively on, like, different ways to improve the craft, and then I actually ended up getting this, like, book deal by, um, sort of I don't know, I mean, I guess you could say it was kind of convoluted. I There was a thing I heard about on Twitter where you could, like, query agents, like, a day where you would tag your tweet, or I guess it's not Twitter anymore, but you could tag your
Right.
tweet with a special hashtag, and then agents, like, might comb through, and if something catches their eye, like, they would reach out to you. So that was, like, a very, like, nice sort of simple way of, trying to find an agent, which luckily ended up working out for me. And then the one I found was the one who sort of had all the connections to, like, different publishers and stuff that I could send pitches when I ended up finishing them up, and then that's how this book got picked up.
Wow.
Mhm.
That right there is a beautiful story about the positive power of
Mhm.
social media,
I
especially
know.
given some of the ways people think
Oh,
about
yeah.
Twitter or X or whatever we call it at the moment.
Mhm.
It does put us in connection with other
Yeah.
people in ways that are not possible without it, and I love that this book what if you
Mhm.
didn't send that tweet?
Yeah. I know, I know. Yeah, I remember because I didn't have Twitter before going to college because I was like, "Oh, it's hard to keep up with all this different social media." But, like, all my teachers were like, "This is where, like, a lot of people in the comics industry are, so you should probably have one." And I was like, "Okay, fine." So I made one. And then, thank goodness I did.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
I love that. I love when I get to know a little piece of the backstory that might not
Mm.
be as well known, and now I've just got
Mhm.
something that I can tuck away. Number 1, that you can do such a thing like that
Yeah.
on Twitter and really
Mhm.
have, the people that you hope to look at those tweets actually do, and that it actually turned into
Mhm.
a real live book that I'm holding in my hands.
Yeah.
It's
It
so
was like a success story.
wow. Oh,
Mhm.
that's wonderful. Well, let's talk
Mhm.
about the book then that came to be
Mhm.
because of a brave tweet, I guess. Camp Prodigy. So
Mhm.
we've got a lot of things in this book. And
Mhm.
I don't mean a lot of things in that it's too much to
Mhm.
read or to juggle. I mean, there are so many places for readers to find an entry point, no matter
Mhm.
who the reader is, child, adult, musical, anxious, not anxious. I think there are so many places that any reader coming to this will number 1, likely find themselves somewhere, and then number
Mhm.
2, see something different as well, which is the whole point, of reading is to get both.
Yeah.
So I would love for you to kind of introduce listeners to
Mhm.
Camp Prodigy if they haven't been able to pick it up yet,
Mhm.
and just tell us about it in your words and why you chose this to be book number 1.
Right, right. Yeah, well, you gave a very good introduction as well at the beginning. So I guess I'll get right into it. Yeah, so Camp Prodigy, um, when I was coming up with the idea for it, I don't actually tend to do as much in like sort of contemporary fiction. So it was kind of like a uncharted waters for me. And I was thinking like, how do I make this unique? Like, how do I make it a book that only I could make? Um, so because that's
Love
the sort
that.
of thing I want to draw, yeah.
Yes.
And so I was thinking like, okay, well, I guess it's the only way to really do that is to just take all of the pieces that of things that have happened to me or things about me and then just put it into one thing. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just do that. So I just, I used to play orchestra and play in an orchestra in middle and high school. And I still play the viola sometimes. And I am non-binary, so I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna have non-binary protagonists.
Mhm.
Um, I personally, a part of the book is about sort of like the anxiety surrounding competition. That's not actually for me something that really was something I experienced that much, but it was something that like I saw friends and family experience a lot. And it was always because it was like harder for me to relate, I felt stronger about it. I was like, oh, like wish they wouldn't be so like worried about like
Yeah.
how to be the best, how to be perfect, how this and that, because it was for me, it didn't feel as difficult. It was like, oh, I wish other people could feel the same way. So I think that book was also kind of born of that feeling like I want to give this to kids too. Like I hope maybe they can get from this book the sense of like, oh, I don't have to be the best. I don't, it's okay to be like bad at something or average at something. The most important thing is that you're enjoying yourself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I, Caroline, would have been the opposite of you. I was that kid who
Mm,
overthought and overworried and thought,
mhm,
okay, if I can't do it as well as I think I should, or someone else thinks I should, then
mm,
maybe I just shouldn't do it. Or if I did it, I
mm.
put so much stress on myself. And I don't know where it came from. I think it was just
Yeah,
really born that way. Unneeded stress that even when I did the thing, it wasn't
mhm,
always enjoyable because of that kind of cloud over my
yeah,
head. So I think that's why I really I could relate to
mm,
what some
mhm,
of the characters were going through, and I always love when I can see the other side of it. Like, "Oh, that's
mm.
what it's like to
Yeah,
not feel
yeah, yeah.
that," and you get both. You get so
Mhm,
many different, perspectives of that in this book, and then the places where they come together too, and
mhm,
you start to see that the threads among us, even though we might not know them,
yeah,
they're there. They're there and we can see them and use them as support. So
yeah,
I love that you wrote from your heart,
mm,
I love what you said, a book only I could
yeah,
make.
mhm,
And I
mhm,
think that's why I had such a great reaction to this. This is
mm,
for me, this was a very like immersive,
mm.
emotional
I'm
book.
glad.
And, I think it's also because it's a graphic novel and I had
Mhm,
the image, and the images
right.
in my mind. Um, but there's also themes that I think readers could relate to. I know I did as well around family
Mhm, mhm,
and the expectations or the perceived, I guess,
yeah,
responses of family was another thread. The craziness of friendship at this
mhm,
age level is another, and then just what happens at summer camp and
yeah.
orchestra camp. There are just so many things that I think it's such a perfect book for this time of
Mhm,
year, as well as for all sorts of kids and adults
mhm.
who might be reading it.
I'm glad. Yeah, yeah. I definitely felt uh, like the reason I've been always drawn to comics is because I feel like they're like the sort of best medium for me to like express my all my thoughts and feelings. You
Yeah.
know, if you're writing like just prose, I feel like for me it's like, oh, this thing that I'm trying to convey, I feel like I could get it across with pictures. But if it's just art, uh, then sometimes I'm like, oh, I feel like something, like the specifics of like someone's words or something could get this across like so with such like help get it across so well. So then, comics, of course, it feels like the ideal medium for me. I feel like it's so much easier to just express everything I'm thinking of, like little details, everything adds up to like, yeah, this is like these are all the things I want to impart, and it's so much easier to convey them. Mhm.
Yeah. I loved, I think my favorite scenes. Wait, do
Mhm.
I still call them scenes? What
I
do
think you can.
panels, scenes, panels?
Yeah, you can call them, well, panels are, I guess, the individual boxes, but scenes, if it's like if you're talking of like a few pages or so, yeah, I think that would work.
Okay.
Mhm.
I mean, I loved them all, of course, because like you
Mhm.
said, you need both, you get both. It just heightens the experience, I think, in a way, almost like a picture book, but differently to
Yeah.
that story in your mind. But I think
Mhm.
my favorite, maybe I'll just say favorite pages,
Mm.
is when you would have a couple of pages with, a bustle of things going on, and there would be
Yeah.
multiple people, and there would be speech bubbles, and you get that feeling of, okay, these are middle school kids, and they're busy, and there's camp, but
Mhm.
there's a lot on their mind. But then
Mhm.
you would turn a page, and the page would be more of a full page or an almost full
Mhm.
page. And what always struck me on those pages was that I could just feel and see the emotion of that character.
Mm.
A lot's going
Mhm.
on, a lot's going on. Bam. What am I going to do with it? How am I going to feel? And I was,
Mhm.
people can't see, or else I would hold up the
Yeah.
pages that were um my favorite. But I've got to
Mhm.
ask, and maybe you have an answer, maybe you don't, but how the heck do you put so much emotion on a character's face like
Mm.
that in a comic? It boggles my mind how just a couple of well-placed lines or
Yeah.
swoops can just convey so much. How does that
Mhm.
happen?
I know. Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, a lot of practice.
Right, right. It
Yeah.
seems like an easy swoop to me, and it's
Mhm.
a lot for you, but
Yeah. It sort of becomes, it's after all this time of drawing and drawing and drawing, it becomes like almost just natural. Like I have the the sort of going from my brain onto the page. It's like just directly on there. Like I feel like there's no needed for like need to translate what's in my brain onto the page. It's like directly just comes right out of my pencil or anything. So for me, it's like, obviously if you're starting from like the beginning, if you don't draw very much, it's probably like, oh man, I have to think about all of this. Like, what does this emotion look like? What does that look like? But in my mind, it's like, I feel like since I've done it so many times over and over again, it's like, okay, I have an exact idea for the expression or the feeling, and I can just toss it right on there.
yeah.
Mhm.
I think that's where I see the like the manga
Mhm.
influence, because that's what
Yeah.
fascinates me about the manga too, that they just do that so well. So then
Yeah.
my follow-up question, because you
Mhm.
mentioned pencil, how
Mm.
do you actually do it? Do you start with
Right.
pencil and sketch and then move to something else? How's that
A
work?
lot of yeah, a lot of people have a similar sort of uh, uh, process where they start with like basically in comics at least you tend to start with like a script which looks like a movie script. It's like dialogue and like actions and things like that, and then you go into what they call thumbnails, which are just really small drawings of the full page so that it's like just you go through them very fast. You have a quick idea of like how the actual thing's going to look. With me, I tend to combine those two because I guess like I was saying earlier, with the medium of comics, if I were just to write it as a script, I'm like, I don't need to describe this thing. I already know what it's going to look like. So
Yeah.
I just jump straight to the thumbnails and I include dialogue and everything there. And and then after that, people tend to go into sketching, which is, where they break out the pencils and stuff. Um, and it's like sort of refining the thumbnails. Then people will go to like inking, where they
Mhm.
refine again, and then you can erase like any stray pencil lines. And then if you're coloring the book, that's like sort of the one of the final steps. I tend to do that digitally because I just find it easier. And Then after that, you put in like the word balloons and everything, and then you're pretty much done. So it's like a sort of gradual building of it.
Yeah.
And people will, sometimes do everything traditionally with like pen and paper. Some people will do it all digitally, like with a tablet. I tend to use a mix of both, but it's all, the variation of uh, materials and mediums is just up to the person as well.
Yeah. So you've got a mix of old school and new
Yeah.
new tech. That's how I love to roll too. I've still got my old fashioned
Hmm.
paper planner and paper notebook, but
Yeah,
love
yeah.
me a good Google Doc and all of that too.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
fascinated by the process, especially of people who are just so talented in the drawing area because I can
Mm.
get a stick figure on that
Mhm.
page. So I really appreciate you laying out the
Yeah.
progression from very beginning, to the middle and to the end. And
Mhm.
the other thing that I loved that
Mhm.
your book did was, it varied every couple of pages maybe, but
Mhm.
the backdrop of
Mm,
some of those
mhm.
squares would change, or when it kind of blew up to just one scene, you would kind of be immersed in what that square was. I really loved the changing backdrops and how it affected just
Thank you.
the feel and the mood and the tone of it
Yeah.
all. So many
Mhm.
choices
Yeah.
must go into putting this on the page.
Yeah, because when a lot of times, you have you like to put an establishing shot where it's like a very big panel and you have the whole environment there so the readers actually know where the characters are. It's not just like, oh, they're in a vague sort of blank space, like they're somewhere. But so, and then after that, it's like, you could get to be more flexible. You're like, oh, do I include the background in this panel or do I not? Like, is it going to be distracting from this or that, or should I focus more on the mood or the feeling? So it's gets a little bit more complicated but also easier because, hey, you don't always have to draw the big whole background in every
Right,
panel after that point.
right. So I know you said that you value both the words and the
Hmm.
images, which is why the comic
Hmm.
or the graphic novel genre is so perfect for you.
Hmm.
Does your brain think back and forth like that, where you'll have an idea that maybe you write first and then you draw, or does the drawing usually come first? You can tell I'm obsessed with
Hmm.
process here.
Yeah, yeah. In my mind, I tend to, gosh, I think it's all just comics in there too. Like
It's
I
all
tend to
bundled
see
together.
yeah, I tend to see things in like sort of scenes that are like, you know, visual but like with like dialogue or this or that. It tends to be like if I come up with an idea, um, I think it usually tends to be like a vague image or a concept, and the details of both, like the visual and the more textual, will like come to me gradually as I think about it more and more. So they're pretty much intertwined the way through.
So do you ever find that you like think in comic book form in your actual life too? It's like it just appears in your mind like
Oh yeah. I think sometimes there have been times when like, something's happening in my actual life, some event, like I'm meeting up with a friend or I'm like doing something, or even if I'm like having trouble like figuring out, I don't know, some life thing, I'll think to myself like, oh, this would make for a funny comic or
yes.
something. Like there's so many times like that. I'm like, oh, if I wrote a character like this, and then I think to myself like, wait, hold on, you're just having a regular day right now. You don't have to think about comics right now. But it's just always in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. And that just means, there are so many other book possibilities for the future
Yes.
too, depending on what's
Oh,
going on in your
definitely.
life.
Yeah, I feel like it's, for me at least, pretty easy to come up with an idea, like the sort of initial spark. So I have this like Word document where I write down all the things that I thought were especially good. And then like if there comes a time when I want to like write like prepare to write a new book, or if I want to like write a comic that I'll post online, then I like go back into my document. I'm like, okay, which one's good to be this length? Which one's good to be long or short or this or that? And so it's like I have a sort of pick of all of the ideas I've thought up over time, which is nice.
I love that. Just a collection of inspiration, just
Yeah.
kind of waiting for you. So you do
Mhm.
yours in a Google Doc, and
Mhm.
I'm an old school
Hey.
notebooker, but they all work. It's just a place so
Mhm.
that you don't forget those little gems that, pop
Yes.
into your mind that maybe aren't right for right now, but could be something
Mhm.
amazing later.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I always tell my kids, like, you never know what notebook you might end up in
Mhm.
if depending on what you
Uh-huh.
do and what you say.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
So if you think about right now, we're kicking off summer reading
Mhm.
season. Some of us have kicked it off a little bit earlier than others, but we are on the East Coast, and at least in New York, school
Mhm.
is just winding down right now.
Mhm.
And so hopefully, we have a lot of educators, caregivers, librarians that are listening right now. And
Mhm.
not only is this a wonderful book for middle-aged readers, but it's a wonderful book for middle-aged readers right now because it is
Mhm.
also set in this summer camp kind
Yeah.
of experience, which makes it so timely. As you think
Mhm.
about young readers picking up your very first book that is being set into their hands, what what are you hoping for? What do you hope for them? What do you hope for you? Like what are you thinking about? Because this is a pretty special time.
Mhm. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. It's like I haven't always I just tend to sort of yeah, like in the past I've just drawn sort of whatever I've wanted to without really as much of a regard for like, oh, what age should the audience be? So this is like I feel like the first time I've really like been thinking so much about like, oh, like this is yeah, I wonder how the kids will like think about this who pick it up.
Mm,
I sort of I wanted to when I was coming up with it write something that wasn't that was for middle grader readers because younger than that, like I think it takes some skills that you have to develop, you'd have to know like I don't know elementary school age kids as well, so I feel like that was intimidating. But with middle school aged kids, um, it's like you're starting to be more aware of like the people around you, the like society around you. You are more aware of what your friends think, what your classmates think. So it's kind of, and you're growing up, puberty might be hitting soon. So
yep.
it's like kind of an intimidating time. Um, so I definitely wanted to write a book that me as a middle schooler would enjoy. Like I was thinking to myself, I don't want to write too simply because I think, even in young kids can like grasp emotional themes and like lots of things that seem more complicated. So I didn't want them to feel like I was babying them or anything like that. So that was on my mind. And then just, like hoping that the what didn't seem also like I was like any sort of lecture of like, oh, like make sure to pay attention to these life lessons, like because as a kid you aren't necessarily really thinking in terms of that. You just want to read something and enjoy it. But obviously you'll take there some things will stick in your mind. So I wanted to do something that I would like as a kid. Uh and also, that if I could time travel back and give to myself as a kid, that I would probably get something out of as well.
Oh, I love
Mhm.
that. And it pairs so beautifully with what you said. This is a book that, you wanted to write a book that only you could make,
Mhm. Yeah,
which
yeah.
means you just wrote from the heart
Mhm.
exactly who you were, which is why I think readers will feel the
Mhm.
emotion and really be so invested in these characters and how it could connect to themselves or just help them see things a little bit differently, help them in whatever way they might need. I think that, listening to you talk, that comes through so strongly here. That
I'm
just,
glad.
yeah, that connection to the reader that you can
Mhm.
only do when you've left a little piece of yourself in the
Mhm.
book, and I'm so honored to get that backstory
Oh,
and
yeah.
now I have a better understanding of why this book really just kind of immerses you
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
that, and readers are lucky. They're lucky to have it. They're
Oh,
truly lucky to have it. It's
thank
beautiful.
you. Thank you.
You're
Thank
so
you.
welcome. So well deserved. I would love for you to tell listeners, future
Mhm.
readers, where they can find you online if they want to learn
Yeah.
more about you or they want to grab Camp Prodigy.
Well, I think the easiest way is to go through my social media, which I have pretty much the same username across multiple different sites. So it's 1010 Littlefoot, except it's spelled like ILL or ILIL, Lil. So then if you look that up, you can pretty much find me like anywhere like Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, I think YouTube as well. And then from there, have connected all my links to like my website and the books and stuff so that you can, just jump straight from there into finding anywhere else I am online. Mhm.
Perfect. Well, I'll make sure to put links to your
Mhm.
website, your social handles, and direct links to Camp Prodigy in the show notes so that
Awesome.
readers, future readers, listeners, I always confuse
Hmm.
myself of which one I should say, so I say both, but I will make
Yeah,
sure that
both.
anyone listening who wants to read your book will be able to access it really easily
Hmm.
through the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you so much for
Hmm.
coming on to talk about your debut book. I'm so excited to be
Hmm.
technically kind of part of your launch because it is so
Yeah.
close and to help connect this book to both the adults that can put it into the hands of
Hmm.
kids and the kids who I know will need it and love it this
Hmm.
summer. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was great being here. Thank you for having me.
Happy to. And listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. And I will see you next week. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of Kid Lit Love. Thanks for listening.